One of the greatest obligations farmers have is to provide safe and healthy food to our communities. Whether you're a direct-to-consumer operation like a UP Cup, a farmer's market seller, or a contract grower that ships out fresh foods and produce, customers trust that what we bring to them is safe enough for their kids and grandkids to eat. Today I will be sharing a few tips on how to help you keep yourself and your customers safe when the next disaster strikes. Mother Nature can be ruthless to us in agriculture. From year to year, we never know if it is going to be a drought, a flood, an early heat wave, a late freeze, strong winds, or fires. But we do know that something is going to happen this year as well as next year. So the best option is to be prepared on the front end so we aren't scrambling to react. One of the biggest threats to our field crops is wind and rain. Wind can damage the crops themselves depending on the time of the year. Wind can also create hazardous and dangerous situations for our operation and workers when a tree is knocked down, but it also poses a threat to the safety of our crops. Wind can blow dust and debris that could be contaminated with human pathogens, including stacked manure piles and nearby animal operations. These events could potentially contaminate fresh produce fields in close proximity. Make sure to keep animals and stacked manure far from your crop fields. In addition to wind, heavy rains can result in flood situations, especially in areas that have poor drainage. Flooding is a unique problem with produce crops because it is not only represent a problem of the water drowning or carrying away our crops, but floodwaters can do as much or more harm by bringing in more trouble than they carry off. Floodwaters can easily contain heavy metals, microorganisms, chemicals, or even raw sewage. If you or your neighbors are also operating an animal operation, even cow calves or stockers can contaminate floodwaters to the point that fresh vegetables or fruits are unsafe for human and animal consumption. Knowing what is upstream from your operation and planning accordingly is crucial. A flooded pasture of stocker calves can wash harmful bacteria like E. coli into the floodwaters. Rushing waters that flood a septic system or washes out a clean-out pile from a poultry house upstream can bring dangerous foodborne pathogens downstream. According to the FDA, all food crops that touch floodwaters, either in the field or in storage, are considered adulterated under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Keep in mind that water that accumulates after rain and is not likely to be contaminated should not be regarded as flooding, whether it is standing or pooled. So knowing what could have happened is very important. Knowing what your neighbors are growing or raising is always a good idea, and having an open line of communication with them about when they will spray or spread. Keeping your neighbors informed about those things isn't a matter of being nosy, it is being neighborly and helping your fellow producers know if something happens. Keeping good records about when you spray or treat is always best practice. Having more information is always better than having too little. Taking time to log what you put out, when you did it, and at what rate should be habit. When floods happen, you need to be able to identify two things: what areas were in contact with the flood waters and what might have been in the water. Mark those rows or sections off and contact your extension agents to help determine the best course of action. Not all crops have the same risk factors. Taller plants like corn, okra, tomatoes, or bush berries, whose harvestable foods were out of shallower flood waters, might be safe, whereas low-growing fruits or vegetables like strawberries, melons, greens, or squash might have had contaminated water on the food itself. Even for taller plants, if the wind or debris splash water up on the fruits, this could transmit harmful bacteria. When dealing with ready-to-eat food, you cannot be too careful. Receding flood waters can also leave contaminants in the soil that are brought to the plant. Chemicals like heavy metals and other toxins are quickly taken up by fast-growing leafy greens like spinach, collards, and other greens. After that, root vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and onions take up the toxins and store them in the consumable part of the plant. To prevent potential exposure to infection agents and chemicals that might be present in floodwater-saturated soil, it is advisable to refrain from digging in the soil for several weeks. This is because such contaminants can penetrate deeper in the soil and take a longer time to be naturally removed as they are exposed to less sunlight and less affected by temperature. However, if digging is necessary, it is essential to take special precautions, such as wearing gloves, goggles, and boots. To reduce the risks of foodborne illnesses caused by contaminated soil, it is recommended to not replant into the soil for at least 60 days following a flood event. The USDA and FDA are very clear that adulterated, which means all food in field or storage that have touched flood waters, are to never enter the human food supply. In compliance with the FDA guidelines, farmers must dispose of all crops with edible parts that have been in contact with flood water. This might not be true for animal food supply. Crops that have been exposed to flooding must be tested for mold, bacteria, and heavy metal contamination at the very least before being utilized in animal feed. Based on the test results, the crop might be deemed suitable for animal feed or can be potentially salvaged by reconditioning it. So contacting your insurance company and extension office as soon as a basic assessment has been done can dramatically affect the amount of loss you have and the way you handle it.